All right, welcome back to Resilient Voices and Beyond. I'm so excited for today's episode. But before I get into all of that, special thanks to all you guys listening and all you guys that have been on my podcast before. I just want to thank you guys for being guests. Thank you guys for supporting me. Thank you guys for listening, and continuing to encourage me with this movement and with this podcast. I truly could not be here without you guys, especially the people who continue to come on as guests, because I'll be talking to myself. But that's fine too. But thank you all from the bottom of my heart. I really appreciate it. If you do not know who I am or you happen to stumble across this podcast, my name is Michael D. Davis Thomas, aka MDDT Speaks. Yes, it is my initials. I spent approximately over 11 years in the Michigan child welfare system, started out on the juvenile side and aged out of the foster care side. Started advocating at 15, been advocating ever since, doing wide range of work in the child welfare realm, policy, programming, housing coordinating, working corrections on the juvenile side to working as a youth care worker and supervisor and manager and congregate care facilities, sitting on over 15 different boards and going to school while doing it all. So that's why I'm here. I'm a stakeholder plus a person with lived experience, and I'm just trying to do my part and creating this transformative change, but also educating people a little bit more about the ins and outs around this system and the after for some people. So that's me, but this is not about me. Today, I had a very special guest on. I'm really excited. She's seen me grow up a little bit, so it's kind of like going back full circle to kind of get her story and how she does what she does. So without further ado, feel free to introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. Michael, thank you so much for inviting me to be on your podcast, on your show. I'm really excited to be here with you guys. So my name is Marla Garmo. I'm currently a success coach, campus coach at the CHAMPS program at Wayne State University in Detroit, Michigan.
Awesome. I'm glad to have you on here. Wow. I think I met you around 15 and what have you. And
probably.
But I'll let her kind of tell how we met, and what she was doing then. Sure. But my first initial question is kind of to get a background of you.
Yeah.
I do panels and all these other things, and sometimes we just hear the expertise of the individual, but we don't know the struggles or what life has took them through to get them where they are. So that's really what this platform is here to showcase the individual and uplift the journey, Yeah. So my first initial question is to wherever your earliest experience, what got you into child welfare and what has been this journey leading to now?
Sure. So when I was in my undergraduate education, I was getting a degree in psychology. And getting a bachelor's in psychology, it's one of those degrees where it doesn't lead directly to a career. You kind of have to be a little bit more creative. So I met some people that were doing some work in adoption, and I was super interested in that kind of work. So I did some research, learned a little bit more about how that worked, and then applied for a couple jobs. And the first job I got was with the Department of Health and Human Services after I received my degree in social work. So when I met those adoption workers, they told me that their background was in social work. So then I went ahead and got my MSW. I graduated with my MSW from Wayne State University in 2009. So after that time, you might be a little bit young, Michael, to remember this, but the economy wasn't that great around that time. So it wasn't super easy to find a job right away. And so I took a little bit of time, but then I started with about a year later with the Department of Health and Human Services in Macomb County in January of 2011. Right at the top of the year, I started there, and I was a foster care worker. So kind of fell into the work is kind of what I say, but then it became like a life's passion. So I started off as a foster care worker it just so happened that the cases that I got very early on often had, teenagers or, emerging adult age group, and it was just a good fit for me at that time. So it just was one of those things that sort of naturally happened where I just ended up having a lot of teenagers. And then it led to when Michigan first had extended foster care, what we call young adult voluntary foster care. When we first got that in Michigan, I had a caseload full of, we started working with young people to get them to extend their cases to 21. So then I had, that sort of entire caseload of young people that I keep wanting to say students because of what I do now, but not students. Then they were just, youth on my caseload. So I had youth on my caseload that were, teenagers, emerging adults. And so I just kind of worked with that population. And then that led to me transitioning into becoming the MYOI, or the Michigan Youth Opportunities Initiative Coordinator, which was my last position with DHS. I did that for about 3 years. And that's when we must have met, Michael, was during those youth conferences that we had, at the different colleges. And certainly our paths crossed at that point. And then of course I, always pushed for the youth that I worked with to have all kinds of normalized experiences. And so when we had opportunities to go to Daniel Memorial, I would, find the people that wanted to come. And that's how you ended up coming. Was it you came to Kansas City with us when we went to Kansas City?
Yep.
So that was, the start of it. And around in about the late 2017 was when the position at Wayne State came across, and a former coworker of mine had also left to come work at Wayne State in the campus-based support program. So I was kind of interested in doing something a little bit different, and it was an opportunity for me to also get some more education because, fun fact, when you work at a university, they give you tuition benefits, which is a fantastic, benefit to have, if someone even had just a bachelor's degree and found a job and they want to continue their education. It's a great way to do it without having to pay out of pocket. So I knew that I wanted to get a degree in business, which is what I'm working on right now. I'm an MBA, almost done with that. But so this position at Wayne State came up and I was like, this sounds like fun. I've been doing a lot of work with young people and connecting them to education, but all other, areas. So this would be, a way to work with students that were super interested in moving their life forward and leveling the playing field, as we say that education does. So that's how I ended up here at Wayne State, and I've been here since then, since January of 2018. I started here. It's been about 5 years, and the program here has had a lot of changes and a lot of different parts of the university that we are a part of, and I think it's really great. And I'm happy to be doing this work in an urban environment. I think it's really important that Wayne State has a presence and is constantly, thinking about how to improve outcomes for youth that experience foster care, because we're in Wayne County, and Wayne County has the largest number of youth in foster care. So to have this right in our, literally the backyard of some of the DHS offices is so important. It's important to me. It's important that we have, this foothold, this presence here, because not everyone is meant to go away to school. Not everyone has the desire to do that. Some people want to stay local. It's certainly a cost savings for people that can live, maybe in an SIL home or with a relative, or, with other supportive adults that they have in their life, and then commute to a campus. And why that I believe that, that's important for students is because going to college can be a very isolating experience, and it can be very lonely when you kind of leave your support if you go away. And here, for youth that are local, it allows them to have that, immediate connection to some of those family members and some of those support. Now, we certainly have people that come here from the west side of the state, which I think is really cool. And what I always say is, like, Wayne State's the best because we're in the best city in the state. You can't beat Detroit. Detroit has the culture, it has the fun, it has the arts, it has the sports, it has the food. Name a place that's better in the state. So, we have that, right? So I have that to my advantage. You want to see some culture, so, the DIA is walking distance from our campus. You can catch a sporting event at any one of the games with a quick ride, downtown. So we have that. And I don't know that anyone else can compete with that. Now, we might not have Big Ten sports, but you can go see the Lions, So I don't know if that's better or worse, but depending on if they're winning or losing. But that's what makes Wayne State special, which I think is a little bit more than what you asked me, but I think I give you some more information.
No, it's perfect. It's perfect. I'm gonna bounce back and circle back to some of those endpoints that you made.
Yeah.
But you mentioned you were a coordinator for MYOI, and
Yep.
before that you were a foster care worker.
Correct.
So what if you could tell me, between those two different positions, what were some of the most turning points for you as an adult, but also as an individual navigating through life yourself,
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, what was really awesome about the work that you do, you sort of walk alongside, these young people as they're going through some really challenging times of their lives, right? Foster care certainly isn't always comfortable. It's kind of a messy system. Which is why advocacy and change is so important. But part of that is you get to see people at some of their sometimes in their lowest, but also sometimes in their highest, and you get to see young people graduate when they thought they never would, and you really get to be in their corner. So I think for me, because of my personal experience, so a little bit more about me. So in my personal life, I'm a first generation immigrant to the United States. Both my parents were born in Iraq and came to the United States in the 70s. English wasn't our first language at home. Certainly academic struggles with that transition. And education was super important to my parents. They understood that that was something that separated you from working sort of in a labor type work, to have something a little bit more secure, so you don't have to be on your feet all day. That's like one thing that was important for my dad, that he always expressed to us. And even though, that was the kind of work that he did. So, I'm Chaldean, and we have a foothold in a certain industry, in Metro Detroit. And if anyone knows, it's usually like grocery, party, liquor store type things, right? So that was the work that he did. And he didn't really want that for us. He wanted more for us. So when I get to see young people that also are pursuing academic, goals, it's really it's inspiring, because I knew that was very important, for me and for my family. So that was always something that was encouraged. All of my siblings went to college. We all have, degrees. And it was important, because it really does level the playing field. So, not everyone comes here and has generational wealth that they can sort of live off of. You have to work for it. And so, my parents did the labor. They wanted us to receive the fruits of their labor. So I got to go to college. And of course, it was life-changing for me. I get to do this kind of work, and I don't have to be on my feet all day. And you have certain privileges that come with that, health insurance and paid time off, and all of the beautiful things that come with having a stable income. And so for me, whenever I got to, walk alongside people that were going through that journey too, and it's not an easy journey, right? You said, going to school and doing all of these other things, it's certainly not easy. But a lot of people have to recognize that the sacrifice that they make for today has its payoff for later, right? We can all go and get jobs making $20 an hour right now, go work at Taco Bell or go work at Amazon, and you can make that money, but that's only going to be a temporary, comfort, because there's nowhere to go necessarily, right? And maybe you don't want to do that forever, because it's labor at Amazon and it's labor at, fast food and all these places. So what's going to actually transform your life and change it is having the opportunity to grow. And so, you get that with education, but, young people, unfortunately, they want the benefits today and they don't see necessarily the long-term, which is why I thought about the quote that you asked me to choose for the episode. And it's, the unexamined life is not worth living. And I think in today's world, it's so easy to just not examine. And, examining can be prayer. It can be, meditation. It can be mindfulness. It can be yoga. It can be whatever you want to call it. But if you don't take this time to stop and reflect and say, okay, what is all of this for? What am I doing? What are the choices that I'm making? How is it leading to maybe worsened mental health, feelings and things like that? So that's why I think it's important to really take the time to examine, to really think about, okay, why am I doing all of this? Is this, suffering today? It's not suffering. I wouldn't call education suffering, but it can feel like that at times, right? It can really be a lot, and the stress, but is it going to pay off? And is it going to pay off in a way that's actually going to transform my life? And I think that for me, I know education was, and continues to be. And I think that's probably my favorite part of the work that I get to do, is because I get to work alongside people as they're going through that journey.
Well, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
As I process and listen, and hear, your timeline, as you kind of live that process in which you're, preaching,
Yeah.
of like having to navigate, the educational component, plus, I imagine you watch your parents, pave the way, and do the work so you could, have the opportunity to, pursue that education. So from education to working and, getting into the working world, realizing, stuff costs.
Yeah. Right.
That's all the stuff. And being a foster care worker, then going at another level of, that and being a MYOI coordinator, and then like, well, all right, I seen them get into this
Yeah.
component of, adulting and what have you. How can I help them, get to another step? So it
Right.
seems like you've transitioned, throughout the process
Yeah.
of some of these youth that you work with.
Right.
You've seen them at the very early stage when they enter into the system, to when they're exiting out, trying to figure out life, to okay, now I need to get a job, get a career, and stuff like that. I mean, that may be college,
Right.
So experiencing that in a different lens. I know for me, living it is different,
Of course.
and what have you. But experiencing the good and the bad, with these individuals, but also experiencing life yourself. You have your own personal life that you navigate when you leave work and what have you. How have you managed, mental health and self-care throughout the time? Has it changed? Has it wavered,
Sure.
and what have you throughout this process of, navigating where you want to be?
Sure. No, I think that that's a really important question, because in a lot of this type of work, there is, that secondary trauma, like you said, that, the experiences of other people and their stress and trauma impact you, because you can only hear so many bad stories before it starts to hurt your heart, right? And I think I've been lucky in that I have a really strong, friend network and family network that I can lean on for support. I've always been really lucky in that way that, if I'm having a bad day, being intentional about not being alone, right? Knowing, the unexamined life is not worth living for me too. So being able to say, okay, what do I need? When is it worse? When is it better? You leave work, it's 5 o'clock, it's dark, it doesn't feel good, right? So you have to sort of be proactive, and think, okay, maybe planning some vacations around that weather change, or, that time change, so that you have something to look forward to. And I think having something to look forward to is so pivotal for me. It's always been something that is important. Having something to look forward to. It could be months away, but knowing that, okay, yep, in a few months I'm going to have this trip, or in a few months I'm going to have this time off, or in a few months it's going to be Thanksgiving, or whatever thing, and really thinking about that, because what does that all mean, right? So, I come from a very big family. We have really big events, so I'm looking forward to Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving is this big family event. We all get together, 100 people, deep fried turkey, we do all of that. And so that's a boost, and I can carry that, for a few more weeks until Christmas. And then, it's January, and January and February are probably some of the worst months for most people. It's gray, it's cold, it's icy, it's snowy. So what can you do, during that time? And that's, for me, it's like planning some trips around that time, going to somewhere where it's a little bit warmer, or things like that. But of course, there's spiritual component to it, making sure that, whatever enriches someone, is needed to be, to make sure that you're constantly nurturing that. So for me, spirituality is important. So I make sure that I've always really leaned on that, because I really think that, to do this work, you have to have something that motivates you. You have to have something that pushes you. What are you doing it for? I'm certainly not doing it for, for fame and fortune, because I'm not going to get either of those things. And I know that. But what am I doing it for? If you're only on this earth for such a short amount of time in the grand scheme of things, what do you want to do? And if you can, slightly make it better, I think that that's the motivation. And so for me, it's kind of a culmination of all of those things. And it's really important to also set boundaries, right? I can't, especially now, I'm in this program, I'm kind of by myself. There isn't a big team of people that are doing this work, and some other colleges have bigger teams, but for me, it's generally just me. And, there are times where you feel like you have to be the answer for every one of these students' problems. And the thing is that I can't be the answer and I can't be the solution, because I'm also not the problem, right? So sometimes it really requires the young person to take initiative in their life to want to do better, because I can't want something more than they do, because it's only going to make me exhausted, stressed out, and then share in that crisis that they're in. And so for me, having really good boundaries is important. I'm available to my students. They know that I'm here for them, but there also has to be accountability, because I'm not working with 14-year-olds, right? I'm working with 22, 19, it's a little bit different. If you waited till the last minute to print out your paper and I'm in a meeting and you can't get it printed, you're going to have to learn a little bit about, how to use other campus resources when I'm not available, because you should have planned a little bit more, and that's like a small, example, but there's bigger ones, right? We have, access to all kinds of resources on campus. If it's the middle of the night and a student intentionally didn't utilize those resources, and now they're coming to me at the 11th hour, there has to be a boundary here to say, what can I do right now that's going to make the situation better? Because they're not going to resolve it. But what can you do, Monday morning when the campus reopens and those professionals come, right? I'm not going to edit your paper at 11:30 at night when you should have went to the writing center. So having those boundaries and saying, what, I can't help you right now, but here's the resources that you pay for to be able to use to then, so I'm not stressed out in the middle of the night. So, I think boundaries are important. Boundaries are important for everybody. You don't want to give more than you receive. There's givers and there's takers in this world, and, givers sleep better at night, I think, but, takers, or maybe it's takers that sleep better at night and givers are stressed out. I don't know. But, you got to figure out what kind of person you want to be in the world, right? Are you going to be, I've had those moments. So I say all this like as if it's this perfect, equation, but it's really not. I certainly have had those moments where I have been super stressed out and I have been scared and I have been worried about students, but I've realized that that's not good for me. And that doesn't allow me to do the best work that I possibly can. It's also important too. This is not lifetime work. I think recognizing that there is a, time where you have to say, I'm not giving this the best that I can, because I can't give it the best that I can anymore. And that's when you have to kind of tap out and say, you know what, there's somebody that's 22 that's graduating right now with their MSW. They got all the energy of the world. They're not, as old as I am, and they're ready to take over. And I think that is also a big part of it too. And knowing when, it's time for you to move on, because you can't do anything forever.
Definitely. You mentioned two things that I want to touch on. One of those things is the boundaries and what have you. And it wasn't really specifically, but it just a thought that came to my mind.
Sure.
As a success coach, you're to the you're that emergency line. You're that you're that tightrope that they're holding on to. In some cases, and more times than not, and I ask this question lightly, considering everyone has a unique story, to them and what brought them into care and what have you. But I'm curious, how many students, because we are in this world of recovery from trauma and foster care
Yeah.
and stuff like that. How many of your students, some of the issues that they face in college and trying to navigate college could be a little bit better or be solved if they took the time to deal with their mental health and process their trauma? I'm interested in your side and your take, on that perspective, acknowledging that, granted, dealing with your mental health can be hard.
Absolutely.
Dealing with what you went through as a child could be hard.
Yeah.
But I think it's a conversation to be had about accountability with your own trauma. And it's something I had to do as a person, with my trauma. I had to some point, in my adulthood, take that initiative. And I think you spoke about that, maybe
Yeah.
a piece of paper, maybe this and that, but take that initiative
Sure.
to understand, like, hey, I have to, step up a little bit. And that means I need to analyze some things. So I'm interested in your take on that.
Yeah, it's it's very interesting because when students get to university, to get to college, they're usually at adulthood, and they get to make decisions for themselves about their engagement with mental health services. And so I would say that there are plenty of students that get to this point that are still struggling, or that struggle has now surfaced, that maybe that they were able to cope with, in high school, because it's very different. There's a lot of connection there. There's, maybe, who knows how they grew up. So it certainly is a very important question, because I still believe that many of my students underutilize mental health services and really still need to work on, a lot of the trauma, because, their childhood was a long time. And however long that experience was of that abuse or that neglect that brought them into foster care, it's not going to be 12 sessions that's going to solve that. This is a lifelong, you know, um, process to really heal, because it's it might take twice as long as it took to experience it to heal from it. And of course, every young person is different. When I say accountability is when I say, if we can connect, if in my coaching sessions I can say to a young person, and we can work together to connect connect the dots that say, okay, your struggle in the classroom, which is your inability to focus, you get extremely overwhelmed, you can't focus, whatever the case is. If we can connect that to maybe some mental health issue that you're having, if we can connect those dots and you can agree, and if you get to the point that you agree and then you don't do anything about it, then that's where I say I have to hold them accountable. Because if I were to say to you, Michael, um, you know, you look really unhealthy, tell me about your eating habits, and we talk about it, and you're like, yeah, I eat fast food every single day and I feel crappy and I'm gaining weight and my skin is greasy and X, Y, and Z. And then the next time I see you, you're eating fast food. It's like, if we can't get to the point of saying, okay, we recognize that there's a problem, but we have to move to action. And I'm not saying go out there on your own and figure out how to do it. I'm going to help you. Let's find you a therapist. There's campus resources. We have CAPS here, all that stuff. Because at the end of the day, you deserve to have a better life. Whoever I'm talking to, you deserve to have a stable life. You deserve to have all of these things, but nothing is going to change if nothing changes. We have to have an intervention. I have that, and sign up here on my office where it says, nothing changes if nothing changes. We have to do something to change that, right? The child welfare system is not going to change if we're not screaming at the top of our lungs that we need to do better. So in a person's life, they also have to have that same thing. We have to do something different if we want a different outcome, because magically one day you're not going to wake up not having that stress, that, anxiety, that depression. And these are real clinical things, right? But I always tell a young person, yeah, trauma can change your brain, but we can also change it back. But it's going to take work. You can learn new skills. you can learn new, ways to function, you can learn all of this, but it certainly is a challenge. And I definitely don't think, the pandemic helped when that obviously made things much worse, which isolated people much more, and their coping skills diminished. And, it just, and it was hard for everybody, right? It was hard for me. That was probably one of the times where I hated this job the most, was because nobody wants to talk to you on Zoom. They all want to be in bed. I want to be in bed. Nobody wants to talk to anybody because we can't, because I just want to hug somebody. And so our students need that too. They need to kind of learn all of that stuff again. They learn, and I think that even in the small things that it means to be a student, which is juggling a million things at once. Students will tell me like, well, I had to make all of these phone calls, so I couldn't go to class, or I couldn't do my homework. And it's like, you got to learn to be able to do all of these things together, because life is just going to be that way, unfortunately, right? As a professional, as someone who's working, you have to be able to develop those executive functioning skills, those coping skills, to be able to manage a lot of things. And when things are really stressful, you got a lot of stuff going on, you got papers, tests, you got to make these phone calls to your doctor, figure out where your prescriptions are. You got to call your bank. You got to pay this bill. You have to be able to do all of that stuff. And it is a lot, right? So you got to be able to juggle all of that. And I think a lot of times when students get really overwhelmed, it's easier to just not address anything. Then you have a mountain, and mountains are much harder to climb than little small hills of things to do. So that's all part of the work, is just helping them understand that pace of doing a little bit each day, not overwhelming yourself, kind of, figuring out what system works for you, but waiting until the last minute, all of that procrastination, all of that is a symptom of, of their mental health. And if we could get everything, lined up, I think it could be, it could be amazing. But it's just all of that work to get there is what we got to do. But it's a journey. Definitely. And I'm happy to be on it,
I appreciate you sharing that. I definitely, just a little touch from my own personal story, granted, some point I had to face the childhood part.
Yeah.
I had to be aware of it, understand it, to a certain degree, accept it and forgive it. What all that means is, I was able to get to a somewhat part in my life, you could say healed, or place where I was somewhat over it, to get to the next part. And right. The next part is, and when we're saying that this process of trauma is an ongoing thing, is those things that were scars, cuts, bullet wounds, whatever you want to call them, are healed, but they're still scars now. Like, they're not open wounds anymore. They're scars now.
But there's reminders.
When I navigate other things that maybe triggers, when I get into a new relationship, when I take a new class with a professor that sounds like, my dad,
sure.
Or something like, these regular societal things can counteract with things that I went through in my childhood. Right. And that's where we say that ongoing process is still going, because those scars, they're still there, they may not ever go away completely,
And there's always going to be reminders, right? There's going to be triggers, like if it's holidays, or if it's a birthday, or if it's a death anniversary, or if it's a smell, or if it's a restaurant, or if it's whatever it is. And that's why I always kind of say you got to have gas in the tank to be able to handle this, right? You got to be able to have the tools in the toolbox before it gets to that point. So when you're there, when it hits you, you can then say, all right, now what do I do? Instead of being at a low place, then something big hits you, and then you're even worse. And then college is not an easy place to be in, no matter what, right? Because it's already stressful if you had a perfect life, if that even exists, And I mean, we're just kind of scratching the surface on what it's even like to be a college student in today's world. I think back to what it was like when I was in college. I graduated high school in 2002. Facebook didn't even exist. Half my friends didn't even have cell phones until, a few lit. Now you can't even really disconnect unless you turn your phone off, because it's just, if it's not that, it's this, it's computer, it's an iPad, it's TV, it's everywhere. And it's just all of that stimulation. You have to be able to really, disconnect. And that's why I always, make sure that students are thinking about physical activity when they're here. Take a yoga class, go to the rec center, because you got to be able to have a time where you're really just zoned out. I mean, I know, I think I remember, you like to lift and stuff. So I'm sure that time is that time for you. It's very therapeutic, right? You're working muscles, you're sweating, you're getting, you're getting some of that, that aggression out. I think that's super important, and we have to be able to, again, going back to the sort of theme of the episode, you have to be able to examine your life. When are things going to be harder for you, Michael? Like, okay, what happens if you have an instructor that sounds like your dad? How are you going to handle that? What are you going to tell yourself? What is a tool that's going to say, you know what? It's just a similarity. It's not him. This class is still going to give me, knowledge that I didn't have before. I still have an opportunity to learn from him. We don't have to be buddies. This is 2 hours a week that I got to see this guy, and then it's going to be okay. And then just that self-talk, that kind of getting through it, instead of that shut down, run away, avoid it, never go to class, never drop it, and then now you failed it. So that takes that work.
And I've seen a lot, and that's a perfect scenario. You run away. That's a perfect thing. That's all you do is run away. I started to see, I do a lot of peer support and mentoring now. I'm starting to see where it's not just a run away, and then eventually go talk to some people. It's, bury the trigger moment in, project it out into something different and gaslight, and then it becomes something totally different. Now we in court trying to argue about something because something that triggers you from your past, you didn't utilize your support system. And now you've done some sabotaging behaviors,
right?
Or some things where you messed up a semester, and stuff like that. So the audience members, mental health, recovery from trauma is not just centered towards foster care, or adoptees, or people who just had some kind of deregularity in their life. It's not just centered to those people. We all endure trauma, in some facet, and it all impacts us. So really taking that lens, and examining those parts, and seeing what you can do to better prepare yourself, for society and for life. The other thing that you pointed out that really stood out to me, and it's something it stood out to me because I preach about it, all the time, and I have rarely heard somebody else mention it so eloquently, is the expiration date. Now, I'm a firm believer that I'm what you would call a frontline individual in this game. I do these podcasts and stuff like that where it may seem that I'm separated, and I do a lot of national advocacy, but I'm also doing peer support. I'm in courtrooms, I'm working with foster families and what have you. And I'm right there, in the front lines of this. I know for me that there's going to come a time where I have to step back, and it may not be me completely leaving out of the realm, because this realm of child welfare is so ingrained and attached to my heart. I don't see myself completely like, I'm good, tired, for me, what I see myself doing is stepping away from the front lines to do more macro things, maybe teaching, being a professor, helping social work students, be better, or what have you, writing a book or what have you. But I was really intrigued that you mentioned that, and I wanted to get a little bit more on your take, on that, because not a lot of people speak about that. So feel free to share.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think you're that transition from kind of the one-on-one, that, the frontline stuff, to that more macro level is a perfect transition. It's a perfect trajectory, because when you've done this work one-on-one, you have that vantage point. You know what it's really like. You know what it's like to see people that are really going through it, that had the hard times. And then you're able to say, okay, we need to do something more at, this level. So if you're like, okay, inflation is hit hard, $5,000 for a car is not enough anymore. We got to push for now 7. So we got to do something, because we know, all right, you buy a car for $5,000, it runs for 2 months and then it dies. Well, that didn't do you anybody any favor. So now how can we go next? How can we go next? And you wouldn't be able to do that without this one-on-one work. So you need that experience to be able to go on. And that's how it is in a lot of places where, you're first a worker, then you're a supervisor, and then so on and so on. So I think that, and I think it's necessary, right? You want to have the people with a lived experience with being the ones that are leading this change. I can't, what I can say, I can talk for 2 hours. I can write all the, dissertations and theses I want. I can, get all the degrees, but it means nothing compared to what one person's experience is like. And what's even more valuable is when a person can recognize that their experience, and also take sort of themselves out of it. So when you're advocating, and it's not about what Michael experienced, but about foster care changing for everyone, and for the ones that are not in care yet, and making it better for them. And that's when it really becomes, we can see systems being impacted and changed. It's going to take a lot of work, right? If we understand the historical kind of roots of the child welfare system in the first place, to be able to change that, it's going to take a lot of time. And I think we're having the conversations, we're doing the things that we need to do, but it is a long time coming. And I don't think there's anything wrong with someone saying, I need to take a break from the one-on-one, because it's a lot, it's a lot. And because I think it's better to say, I need to take a break, than to do the work when you're not okay. And then it's worse for the young people that we're involved with, because then they, I don't want to give anybody my worst day. I don't want to give my students my worst day. I want to give them my best day. Is it perfect? Absolutely not. Certainly students have seen me, if they came in right now and saw my pupils dilated like they are, because I was just at the eye doctor, they might think that I'm giving them my worst day. But so that's where you have to have the boundary and sort of the work yourself, and saying, I need to take a break for a little bit. I need to work on me. I need to, get my household right. And then I can come back, because it's always going to be there, right? A broken system is going to take a long time to fix.
Definitely. Yeah. And, burnout is real. Secondary trauma is real.
Absolutely.
So when we think about social workers, we think about peer support, specialists, we think about parent partners, we think about the people who are supervising these, I forget what this position is called, supervising those family visits, right? And we think about the youth care workers in these congregate care facilities, and what have you, all these like frontline jobs.
Yeah.
Where you don't directly have to always have a bad case to feel the impact, the emotion from what's going on, and feeling that, over time can do a lot. It can give you some sense of burnout. It can give you some sense of, a filled cup, and then it's okay to be like, I think I've had enough where I'm at with this.
Yeah.
And, that doesn't have to be a close to your work in the realm of, child welfare or human service. It just means that you may take a back seat, or find something else that isn't as exhilarating or, stressful or what have you. Which there's so many different facets, so many different jobs, or so many different positions, I've worked a good 5 or 6 of them. Yeah. So, I think that's really, really cool and a really big thing to acknowledge,
Yeah.
on top of as we're talking about mental health and we're talking about self-care,
Right.
acknowledging that, expiration dates do come for some people. And, that doesn't mean that they're bad at their job,
Mhm.
doesn't mean that, they're bad individuals, and some people have those bad days, and unfortunately that's when they realize it, but that doesn't mean that because of their worst day that's who they are.
Right.
So definitely wanted to acknowledge that. I only have a couple more questions for you.
Sure.
First and foremost, I want to appreciate you taking the time to
Yeah,
speak
of
with me,
course. No, I love this.
and seeing you. It's
Yes,
awesome
that
to
too.
see your face. It's been a minute. um my last question is, what advice would you like to leave here?
So I think, I'll have advice to the young people that are in care would be find something that moves you, that pushes you, that motivates you, and stick with it. You know, I, one of the things that always made me sad about this work was when I met someone who had no reason that, by their own admission, they had no reason to live. They couldn't, they had nothing to hope for. And so hope is a big word that I want young people to think about. I want them to hope for something, hope for a better life, better future, better relationships, hope for something so that could be the motivator. Let that hope say, all right, I'm gonna, go to school because it's gonna change my life, or I'm gonna get this job that's gonna change my life. You gotta want something. You gotta want something to move you. But for people doing this work, I say, thanks for all the support in all of this. I can't do this alone. It certainly takes a village. I think what we've created in Michigan is so fantastic with all of the different types of campus-based support programs. We've got, people like that are doing the work like the work that Fostering Success Michigan does, the work that, Park West Foundation does, all of these church partners. It's amazing what people can come up with, the different foundations, Programs of America, people that are fundraising for scholarships, that are collecting Christmas presents and holiday gifts and all of this work. Like, I just want to say thank you to them, certainly, because you can't do any of this work alone. We need people like Michael to say, we got to make changes, we got to improve it, we got to do better. But it's also bringing awareness, and that awareness then says, what do these young people need? And so for me, it's like, I'm so happy to be a part of it. I'm just so happy that there's so many people here with such strong passion. So I would just say, yeah, thanks for that. And, to just highlight my theme once more for all the listeners out there, the unexamined life is not worth living. So spend some time, examine your life, think about what drives you, what motivates you, what pushes you, and what you want out of it.
Definitely, I couldn't have said it better. Truly couldn't have. This last statement question, whichever you want to call it, that I'm gonna ask of you, it's more so let us know how people can stay connected, or what have you. But any last comments? You got a song, a book, a rap, how can people get information about, please? I feel so bad because I didn't draw the blank. It's not. I'm not about to butcher it. What is the campus-based support?
Yeah, we're the CHAMPS
Oh,
program at
Jeff,
Wayne State, and you
thank
can
you.
easily find my information at champs.wayne.edu. So very simple. So yeah, I mean, I would say that if anyone was interested to learn more about the support that we provide to students, they could go onto our website, champs.wayne.edu. My contact information is there. You can connect with me there. It's also Champs WSU on Instagram, so you can find us. But certainly, yeah, I mean, we love hearing from people that want to learn more about what we do. And so yeah, absolutely stay connected. You can find us.
Definitely, and I'm gonna throw this gym out there, because I'm pretty sure you serve a lot of different students with many different needs and what have you. If you're in the Wayne County area, and thinking around this holiday season, where you want to give to, donate to, support, or what have you. There's some students in this
Yes,
program that could benefit, from some
absolutely.
toiletries, from some gas cards, bus cards, DoorDash,
Yep.
just thinking about
We
these
love a Uber
adulting
gift
things.
card. We love a, Meyer gift card because you can get gas or you can get groceries.
Hmm.
And if it's not a financial way, just send us good vibes, send us good thoughts, And if you have any students that are, wanting to get connected and pursue their education, I'd be happy to talk to anybody. Even if they don't decide on Wayne State University, I'm happy to talk to anybody about college stuff always, and make sure that they know that there's opportunity out there for them.
Definitely, surely been an honor and a privilege having you on.
Likewise, Michael, it was so good to see you.
Definitely. I couldn't really, I'm trying to put the words together, but I think about how many people that were impactful throughout my journey. And, thinking you being one of those alongside Whitney. And, I'm thinking about some of those other coordinators I got to meet in that time frame, because it's a
Yeah,
little bit different now. Not saying
sure.
that the coordinators that we have are good, but it was different coordinators during that time,
Oh yeah.
and what have you. And I know most of them all have transitioned on to different capacities and positions. So I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart
Yeah.
for, one, taking a chance on me because I wasn't even with your group,
Okay.
going on a trip and, believing in me and supporting me, as a young man. I truly mean that, and I can't say it to everyone I've been impacted by, so it means a lot to be able to say it to you, and to let you know that you did a lot to help me be where I am today and supporting me. So thank you for all your
Yes,
work
you're
that you're
welcome. And I'm
continuing
I'm
to do.
happy to, be in your corner, Michael.
Thank
So
you.
good luck to you.
Thank you. As we get ready to end this out, this has been episode 26 of season 2 of Resilient Voices and Beyond. So, thank you guys for listening. As I exit out, a couple things. We talked about mental health. I don't think anything in this specific episode could be triggering. It may be.
Trigger warnings are always not a bad thing.
Definitely, if it was, just know that you can reach out to me if you have any questions, something you want to talk about, something that struck you. I'm here as a resource. I would love to help you find resources to connect you with mental health services, or self-care things or what have you. I want people to leave these conversations on a positive note. So if something did trigger you, before you go do anything else, do something, with some mindfulness exercises, some self-care, bring yourself back to baseline, and have a good rest of your day. Also, it's getting back to winter, cold and flu season, COVID out there. Please be safe. We all are a bit part of this big village, so please do your part, to make sure that you're okay and your loved ones are okay. Outside of that, be ending season 2 at the end of December, and I'll be taking a little bit of a break to just continue to work in the communities and in person. So I look forward to the holidays to come. I look forward to, the work, and I hope that you guys continue to follow me and continue to listen. This has been episode 26. You guys have a good night, good morning, good whenever you're listening to this. Thank you guys. Talk to you guys soon.